I was worth $3.2 million when I walked into that conference room. 20 minutes later, my own children had legally stolen everything. Or so they thought. They forgot one thing. The man who taught them to read contracts never stopped reading his own. Before I tell you how I destroyed them with a single phone call, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're listening from in the comments. The mahogany table stretched between us like a casket. David sat at the head, my firstborn, 45 years old, and already graying from the stress of his failing construction business. To his left, Sarah, 42, kept checking her phone, probably looking at beach houses she couldn't afford yet. Michael, my youngest at 38, drummed his fingers against the table in that nervous pattern I recognized from when he was 12 and had broken something expensive. "Dad, you understand what we're doing here today, right?" David's voice carried that careful tone people use with toddlers and the senile. I nodded slowly, letting my hand shake just enough as I reached for the glass of water. Power of attorney. "You explained it yesterday." "And the day before," Sarah muttered, not quite under her breath. The lawyer, a young man named Peterson who couldn't have been practicing more than 5 years, slid the papers across to me. "Mr. Marcus, this is simply giving your children the ability to help manage your affairs. Nothing changes unless you become unable to make decisions yourself." I'd built my first house with these hands in 1979. Laid every brick, hammered every nail while David was still in diapers. Now those same hands trembled as I picked up the pen. But what they didn't notice, what they were too busy planning my obsolescence to see, was that my eyes were sharp as ever, reading every line of that document. "Where's Linda?" I asked, looking at David. "Thought your wife would be here for something this important." "She's parking the car," David said. But his eyes shifted left, the same tell he'd had since he was 7, and blamed the broken window on the neighbor's cat. That's when I heard it. The bathroom door down the hall wasn't quite closed, and Linda's voice carried through the thin walls of this cheap lawyer's office. She was on the phone, probably thinking the running water would cover her words. 6 months, Mom. That's what the doctor at the facility said. 6 months of documented confusion, and we can have him declared incompetent. The properties transfer automatically after that. I kept my face blank, confused, harmless. Inside, something Eleanor used to call my construction foreman woke up, the part of me that could calculate load-bearing weights in my head and spot a crooked contractor from across a job site. "Dad?" Sarah's impatient voice cut through my thoughts. "We need you to sign. We have a meeting with the realtor at 3. "Realtor?" I let confusion creep into my voice. "For the Fletcher property," David said smoothly. "The rental on Maple Street. We discussed this. It needs too much maintenance for you to handle anymore. The Fletcher property. I'd renovated that house myself 10 years ago, turned it from a condemned wreck into a home where the Fletcher family had raised 3 kids. They'd never missed a rent payment in a decade. The maintenance David mentioned, a leaky faucet, Mrs. Fletcher had called about last week. But here's what my children didn't know. What their greed had blinded them to." Peterson cleared his throat. "Mr. Marcus, I need to ask you formally, are you signing this document of your own free will?" I looked at each of my children. David, who I'd taught to read blueprints on my knee. Sarah, who'd cried on my shoulder when her prom date stood her up. Michael, who I'd bailed out of jail twice before his 21st birthday and never told his mother about the second time. "Of course," I said, my voice steady and old. "My children only want what's best for me." The pen felt heavy in my hand. 2 years ago I'd signed a different document, one Eleanor had insisted on before the cancer took her, a trust, ironclad and invisible, that owned 51% of everything through a shell company my children had never heard of. Eleanor had been the smart one. She'd seen this coming before I did. "Just sign here, here, and initial here." Peterson pointed to the highlighted lines. I signed slowly, my hand shaking more with each signature. But if any of them had looked closely, if they'd cared enough to watch the actual letters instead of just waiting for me to finish, they would have seen it. In barely visible letters, shaky but legal, I signed under duress instead of my name, 3 times. Linda walked in just as I set down the pen, her face flushed from hurrying, her smile too bright. Did I miss it? Oh, good. It's done. Dad, you're going to love Sunset Gardens. They have activities every day, and the staff is so caring. When? I asked, though I already knew. This weekend, David said, already gathering the papers. We've got movers scheduled for Saturday. Don't worry about anything. We'll handle all the details. They were already dividing my life into boxes, sorting what to keep and what to throw away. But they'd forgotten something crucial. The man who'd built an empire from nothing, who'd survived 2 recessions and a heart attack, who'd buried the love of his life 3 months ago. That man wasn't gone, he was just waiting. I'm tired, I said, standing slowly. I'll drive you, Michael offered, but I could smell the alcohol on his breath from across the table. Gambling debts and day drinking, my youngest had inherited my father's weaknesses. I'll take a cab, I said. As I shuffled toward the door, I heard Sarah whisper to David, "How much do you think we can get for the main house?" "Market value's around 1.8 million, David whispered back. "Split 3 ways after the capital gains tax." They were already spending money from the house where their mother had died, where they'd taken their first steps, where every Christmas for 45 years had been celebrated. But what hurt most wasn't their greed. It was how easily they'd forgotten the man who'd given them everything. At the door, I turned back. "Will you visit me? At this Sunset Gardens place?" "Of course, Dad," they said in unison, the lie as coordinated as everything else about this ambush. Peterson walked me to the elevator. Professional courtesy. As the doors closed, I saw him glance at the signatures on the document. His forehead creased slightly. The look of a man who'd noticed something but wasn't quite sure what. 3 months earlier, I'd stood in this same building for a different reason. Eleanor's will reading. She'd left everything to me naturally after 48 years of marriage, but she'd also left 3 letters, one for each of our children. I'd never opened them, respecting her privacy even in death. Now I wondered what she'd written, what she'd seen that I'd been too blind to notice. The cab driver was a young man, maybe 30, with kind eyes. "Where to, sir?" "Home," I said. "While it's still mine." He glanced in the rearview mirror. "Rough day?" "My children just stole everything I own," I said quietly. "They think I don't know." He was quiet for a moment. "My grandfather went through something similar. His kids put him in a home, sold his house. He died 6 months later." "What happened to them? The kids?" "Karma," he said simply. "Karma always comes." As we drove through the city I'd helped build, past construction sites where my company's signs once stood, I thought about karma, but I also thought about something else, justice. And justice, unlike karma, sometimes needs a little help. The house was empty when I arrived. 4,000 square feet of memories. Eleanor's coffee cup still sat by the sink. I hadn't been able to move it. Her reading glasses were still on her nightstand, marking her place in a book she'd never finish. The walls held 48 years of photographs. Our wedding, the children's births, graduations, grandchildren I barely knew because their parents were always too busy to visit. I walked to my office, the one room my children hadn't ransacked yet while helping me organize. The old rotary phone still worked. Eleanor had insisted we keep a landline. I dialed a number from memory. "Chen and Associates," a professional voice answered. "Tell Robert that Marcus needs to collect on that favor from law school," I said. There was a pause. "Mr. Marcus," he said, "if you ever called to clear his schedule, can you come in tonight?" "After midnight," I said. "I don't want anyone to know." That night I sat in Eleanor's chair looking at our wedding photo. She'd been 22, beautiful in her grandmother's dress. I'd been 24, skinny as a rail but determined to give her the world. "I'm sorry, Elle," I whispered to the photo. "I raised wolves instead of children. But I promise you I'll protect our legacy, even if I have to destroy them to do it." The grandfather clock chimed 11. Time to go see Robert. Time to remind my children that the man who taught them everything they knew had kept a few lessons to himself. But that wasn't even the worst part. The worst part was that they'd already shown my house to realtors while I was holding Eleanor's hand in the hospital, watching her take her last breath. I stood in the cemetery, October rain mixing with tears I couldn't hold back anymore. Eleanor's casket gleamed with water droplets, about to be lowered into the ground, 48 years together, and now I stood alone while my children huddled under their umbrellas, checking their phones. "We need to talk about practical matters," David had said, not even waiting for the priest to walk away. "David, please." I managed, my voice cracking. "Your mother's not even in the ground." "Dad, I'm just being realistic. You can't manage that big house alone. 7 rental properties. The investment accounts, it's too much for one person." Sarah's husband Tom actually laughed. A small, cruel sound. "Finally going to get our share," he muttered to Sarah, thinking I couldn't hear over the rain. But I heard everything. I heard Michael on his phone with someone saying, "Yeah, the old man's loaded. Once we get power of attorney, I can pay you back everything." I heard Linda tell her mother on a video call, "The house alone is worth almost $2 million. David says we can probably get him into assisted living by Christmas." Christmas. Eleanor always made sugar cookies from her grandmother's recipe. She'd teach any grandchild who wanted to learn, but they'd stopped coming years ago. "Dad's not incompetent," Sarah said to David. "But not in my defense. We need him to sign everything over willingly, or it gets complicated." "He's grieving," David replied. Confused. Forgetting things. Dr. Morrison said that's normal for his age. I wasn't forgetting anything. I remembered teaching David to ride a bike in our driveway, running beside him until he found his balance. I remembered Sarah's first heartbreak, how she'd sobbed in my arms for hours. I remembered paying Michael's college tuition by taking every overtime shift available, coming home at dawn covered in concrete dust and sweat. "The Fletcher property needs to go first," Linda said, joining their circle. "That neighborhood's gentrifying. We could get triple what it's worth as a rental." The Fletchers. Good people who'd been through hell when Mr. Fletcher lost his job. I'd reduced their rent without telling anyone, let them pay what they could until they got back on their feet. Their youngest had just gotten into college. First in the family. "What about the construction company?" Michael asked. "Dad dissolved that years ago," David said. "But he still owns the equipment yard. That land's worth a fortune to developers." The equipment yard, where I'd taught all 3 of them to drive, where David had his first kiss behind the tool shed, where Sarah practiced her valedictorian speech, where Michael learned to operate a backhoe at 15, and felt like a king. They'd already forgotten every moment that mattered. "I need to go home," I said, my voice barely audible over the rain. "I'll drive you," Sarah offered, but she was already walking toward her Tesla, bought with money I'd given her for her daughter's college fund. The daughter who hadn't come to her great-grandmother's funeral because of a sorority party. "I'll walk," I said. "Dad, it's 3 miles," David protested. But half-heartedly, he was already on his phone with someone. I walked. Every step was agony, not from age but from grief. Eleanor and I used to walk this route on Sundays hand in hand, talking about nothing and everything. She'd point out houses she liked, gardens she admired. She'd known every neighbor's name, every dog, every child. When I finally reached home, soaked and shivering, there was a realtor's sign in my yard. "Coming soon," it proclaimed in cheerful yellow letters. They hadn't even asked, hadn't even pretended to care what I wanted. I called the realtor's number on the sign. "Hello, Mr. Brennan. This is Gloria from Sunset Realty. Your son David said you'd be calling to confirm the listing agreement." "When were you here?" I asked. "Oh, we did a walkthrough yesterday afternoon. Beautiful home. That vintage kitchen will photograph beautifully. Buyers love original hardwood floors." Yesterday afternoon, when I was at the hospital holding Eleanor's hand as her breathing slowed, when I was whispering 48 years of love into her ear, hoping she could still hear me, when I was promising to protect everything we'd built together. "Cancel the listing," I said. "I'm sorry," David said. "David doesn't own this house." Cancel it." I hung up. The kitchen still smelled like Eleanor's last attempt at cooking 3 days before the end. She'd tried to make my favorite pot roast but couldn't remember if she'd already added salt. She'd added it 3 times. We'd eaten it anyway, laughing through tears at how awful it was, knowing it would be our last meal together at home. Her apron still hung on its hook. Her handwritten recipes were still tucked in their box. Her coffee cup, the one with World's Best Grandma that Sarah had given her 15 years ago back when she still visited, sat by the sink. I couldn't save Eleanor, but I could save her legacy. That night I found Eleanor's emergency folder, the one she'd made me promise to read when the time was right. Inside were 3 letters for our children, sealed and dated a month ago. There was also one for me. "My dearest Marcus," it began in her shaky handwriting. "If you're reading this, then I'm gone. And they've shown you who they really are. I've watched them change over the years, watched love turn to entitlement, visits turn to valuations. They look at us and see dollar signs, not parents. I'm sorry I won't be there to protect you from what's coming. But I did what I could. Check with Robert Chen about the trust. I made sure they can't take everything, even if they take you. Protect yourself, my love. They're not the children we raised anymore. Maybe they never were. All my love, Eleanor." The trust. She'd insisted on it 2 years ago, said it was just estate planning. I'd signed whatever she wanted. I always had. Eleanor handled the books while I handled the buildings. It had worked for 48 years. I called Robert Chen that night. We'd met in 1975, when he was washing dishes at a restaurant where I was doing renovation work. Brilliant kid, no money for college. I'd hired him as a laborer, paid him enough to attend night school, then law school. He'd tried to pay me back over the years. I'd always refused. "Marcus," he answered on the first ring. "I heard about Eleanor. I'm so sorry." "She set up a trust," I said. "I need to know what it does." There was a pause. "She made me promise not to tell you unless things got bad. Are things bad, Marcus?" "My children are trying to put me in a home and take everything." "Then you need to know." Eleanor was smarter than all of us. That trust owns 51% of every asset through a shell company. Your children could take everything else, but the controlling interest would still be yours. She also recorded several conversations with them over the past year. Legal in this state. She said you'd know when to use them. Recordings. My quiet, gentle Eleanor had been recording our children. She'd seen what I'd refused to see. But that revelation would come later. For now, I had to survive the next few months, had to let them think they'd won while I built my case. The movers came that Saturday as promised. They weren't gentle with Eleanor's things. These strangers my children had hired to dismantle our life. David supervised, marking furniture for storage, sale, or trash. "Careful with that," I said as they grabbed Eleanor's rocking chair, the one where she'd nursed all 3 babies. "It's going to Sarah," David said. "She's always wanted it." Sarah hadn't visited her mother in 6 months. The chair would end up in her garage. I knew, eventually sold at a yard sale. They packed my clothes in 2 suitcases. 48 years of life reduced to what could fit in a Honda Civic's trunk. The photo albums, the letters, the memories, all boxed and labeled for storage. "Where are Eleanor's jewelry boxes?" Linda asked, not even pretending to be subtle. "In the bedroom," I said, watching her practically run up the stairs. She didn't know Eleanor had given her real jewelry to charity shops over the years, keeping only costume pieces and our wedding rings. The wedding rings were in my pocket. They'd have to pry them from my cold, dead hands. Michael was in my office going through files. "Dad, where do you keep the property deeds?" "Safety deposit box." I lied. They were with Robert now, along with everything else that mattered. "We'll need to get those transferred," he said, not looking at me. The drive to Sunset Gardens was silent, except for David's phone constantly pinging with messages. I watched the city pass by, the buildings I'd helped construct, the neighborhoods I'd helped develop, 40 years of sweat and blood, and my children saw only numbers on a balance sheet. But I had patience. Eleanor always said I could wait out anyone, contractors, suppliers, even her when she was angry. Now I'd wait out my own children, let them think they'd won. Let them get comfortable. Because what they didn't know, what their greed had blinded them to, was that I'd already started recording everything too. Sunset Gardens smelled like industrial disinfectant and disappointment. The lobby tried too hard to look like a hotel with fake plants and generic artwork that screamed bulk discount. The receptionist, a woman half my age with a practiced smile, handed David papers to sign while talking to me like I wasn't there. "Mr. Marcus will love it here. We have bingo on Tuesdays, chair yoga on Thursdays, and ice cream social every Sunday." I'd built a $40 million construction company from nothing. I'd negotiated with union bosses and city commissioners. Now I was being offered bingo and ice cream like a child at summer camp. My room was on the third floor, 200 square feet that cost $8,000 a month, paid from my own accounts that David now controlled. A single bed, a small dresser, a chair by the window that looked out onto the parking lot. The bathroom had grab bars and an emergency pull cord, reminders that I was expected to deteriorate, not thrive. "It's nice, Dad," Sarah said, though she couldn't meet my eyes. "Cozy. Cozy." Our master bedroom had been 4 times this size. Eleanor's walk-in closet alone was bigger than this entire room. "We'll visit every week," Michael promised, already backing toward the door. "Of course," Linda added, checking her phone. "We'll bring the kids." The kids, my grandchildren who I'd seen exactly twice in the past year, who called me Marcus instead of Grandpa because their parents never corrected them. They left within 20 minutes. Eager to escape the smell of old age and surrender, I sat on the narrow bed, springs creaking under my weight, and looked at what my life had become. But instead of despair, I felt something else. Determination. That night, at dinner in the communal dining room, I met Agnes. She was 80, sharp as a razor, eating alone at a corner table. Her posture was perfect, her silver hair immaculate, her eyes watching everything. "You're new," she said when I sat across from her. "First day?" "Yes." "Children?" "3. Let me guess, they convinced you it was for your own good. Too much house to manage, too many responsibilities, need more care than they can provide." I looked at her more carefully. There was something familiar about her face. "Judge Agnes Thornton," she said, extending her hand, retired forcibly. I knew that name. She'd presided over some of the biggest cases in the state, known for her brutal sentences for elder abuse and fraud. "What happened?" I asked. "My son happened. Power of attorney, just like you, I'd bet. He's a lawyer, thought he knew all the angles." She smiled, and it was sharp as glass. "He forgot. I spent 30 years watching lawyers think they were smarter than everyone else." "What did you do?" She leaned in closer. "You know what they don't teach in law school? Patience is the deadliest weapon. My son put me here 18 months ago. Last week he was disbarred for embezzlement. Turns out someone had been documenting his theft of my assets for over a year. Anonymous tips to the Bar Association, the IRS, the FBI. You? Prove it, she said. Then laughed. I'm just a confused old woman in a home. What could I possibly do? That night I called Robert Chen from the payphone in the lobby. They monitored cell phones here but forgot about the ancient payphone. They moved me in today, I said. I know. David filed paperwork to expedite the property transfers. Marcus, he's modified the power of attorney after you signed it. Can you prove it? Working on it. Eleanor was right to prepare for this. That shell company she set up? It's bulletproof. Every transfer they make actually strengthens your position. How long before they realize? At their current rate of stupidity? Months? Maybe never if we play this right. I made more calls that night, to Tony, who'd been my foreman for 20 years, and now ran his own company, to Patricia, who'd been my accountant before David convinced me to switch to his friend, to Dr. Morrison, my real doctor, not the one David had been taking me to. Marcus, Dr. Morrison said when I explained the situation, Your last cognitive test was 6 months ago. You scored perfect. I'll testify to that if needed. The pieces were moving into place. But I needed more. I needed evidence of their cruelty, their conspiracy, their greed. So I started documenting everything. Every day they didn't visit. I kept a calendar marking the empty squares, every credit card charge. I still got statements forwarded to my email, which they'd forgotten to change. Every property listing, every asset transfer, every lie they told about my condition. Agnes became my ally, teaching me the legal angles I'd never learned in construction. We'd sit in the corner of the recreation room playing checkers while discussing strategy. The key, she said, is to let them hang themselves. Give them enough rope and greed does the rest. 3 weeks in, David visited alone. He needed signatures for the Fletcher property sale. Dad, this is a good thing. The Fletchers are moving anyway. That was a lie. I'd called Mr. Fletcher from the payphone. They'd been given 30 days to vacate. No explanation. Where will they go? I asked, playing confused. That's not our problem, David said. Impatient. Just sign here. I signed slowly, carefully, but I also pressed record on the small device Agnes had given me, hidden in my shirt pocket. Good, David said, snatching the papers. The buyer's paying cash, 3 times what that dump is worth as a rental. That dump. The house I'd personally restored, where a family had built their life. David, I said, letting my voice shake. Your mother wouldn't want? Mom's dead, Dad. She's not wanting anything anymore. His voice was cold, efficient. You need to stop living in the past. This is business. After he left, I listened to the recording, clear as day. His contempt, his dismissal of Eleanor's memory, his admission that he was selling the property for far more than he'd told his siblings. That's fraud, Agnes said when I played it for her. Wire fraud if he used electronic transfers, federal crime. But I needed more. One recording wouldn't be enough to destroy what they were building. Michael visited next, reeking of alcohol at 10 in the morning. Dad, I need you to sign something, he slurred, pulling out papers. What is it? Just insurance stuff. David said you need to update beneficiaries. I pretended to struggle reading it, but I could see clearly. He was trying to take out a life insurance policy on me. $2 million, with him as sole beneficiary. Michael, I said carefully, are you in trouble? His face crumbled for just a moment. The sun I remembered flickering through. I owe some people money, Dad. Bad people. How much? 150,000. How did you? It doesn't matter, he snapped, then softened. Just sign it, okay. David said it's fine. David said. Always David pulling the strings. I signed it with my left hand, making it illegible. He was too drunk to notice. That night, I called an old friend from construction days who'd moved into private investigation after an injury. Jimmy, I need you to look into my son Michael's gambling debts, quietly. What Jimmy found was worse than I'd imagined. Michael had been embezzling from his employer for 2 years, covering gambling losses. The house of cards was about to collapse. He's maybe 3 weeks from being arrested, Jimmy said. His boss is already suspicious. 3 weeks. I could work with that. But the worst betrayal came from Sarah. She visited with her daughter Emma, my granddaughter. Emma was 23 now, in graduate school, the only grandchild who still sent Christmas cards. Grandpa, Emma said, hugging me. I'm so sorry about Grandma. I wanted to come to the funeral, but Mom said. Emma, go wait in the car, Sarah interrupted. Emma looked confused but obeyed. When she was gone, Sarah turned on me. Don't you dare guilt-trip her. She doesn't need to know about any of this. Any of what? The family business. The properties. The money. It's none of her concern. She's family. She's my daughter, and I decide what she needs to know. Sarah pulled out a tablet. Now I need you to sign these. It's for the Maple Street property. More lies. More theft. But this time I pushed back just a little. I want to leave something for Emma, for her education. Sarah laughed. Actually laughed. Dad, Emma's education is paid for. By me, with my money. The money I gave you for it, I said quietly. Her face flushed. That was a gift. You gave that freely. For Emma, not for your beach house. The slap came so fast I didn't see it coming. My head snapped to the side. My cheek stinging. You don't get to judge me, she hissed. You and Mom living in that massive house while we struggled. Do you know what it's like watching your parents sit on millions while you can barely make rent? You never struggled. I paid for your college, your wedding, your first house. Crumbs, she spat. Crumbs from your table while you hoarded the rest. She left without getting the signature, but I had what I needed. The security camera in the corner had caught everything. Agnes had taught me to always meet in the common areas. They were all under surveillance. 6 months into my imprisonment, David brought Linda and a new lawyer to visit. They had a stack of documents an inch thick. Dad, we need to finalize the estate planning, David said, his tone suggesting this wasn't a request. The new lawyer, a shark named Morrison, smiled with too many teeth. Mr. Marcus, this is simply updating your will to reflect current circumstances. I read through it slowly, playing up the confused old man act. They were trying to disinherit Emma completely, leaving everything to the three of them. But buried in the legal language was something else. A confession that they'd been systematically transferring assets for the past 6 months without proper authorization. Why isn't Emma included? I asked. She's not a direct descendant, Morrison said smoothly. Grandchildren typically aren't included unless specified. She's my granddaughter. Dad, just sign it, David said, impatient. Emma's fine. Sarah takes care of her. I thought of Emma's face at her grandmother's funeral. The tears Sarah had forbidden. The graduation Sarah had missed because of a spa weekend. The birthday cards Emma sent me that Sarah never delivered. I'd found them in David's car during the move, unopened. I need to think about it, I said. There's nothing to think about, Linda snapped. You're not competent to make these decisions anymore. That's why we have power of attorney. Then why do you need my signature? The silence was beautiful. Morrison shifted uncomfortably. They just admitted in front of witnesses that they were coercing someone they claimed was incompetent. Agnes was waiting in the recreation room when they left. Did you get it? She asked. I pulled out my phone, showing her the recording. Every threat, every admission, every cruel word. That's conspiracy, she said. Fraud, elder abuse, coercion, federal crimes if they used mail or wire transfers, she smiled. Time to make some calls? That night, I called Robert Chen. We have everything we need, I told him, but I want to wait. Marcus, why? They're bleeding you dry. No, I said, thinking of Eleanor's letter. They're hanging themselves. Every transfer they make goes through the shell company. Eleanor made sure of that. They think they're stealing from me, but they're actually consolidating my control. You're playing a dangerous game. I'm playing the only game that matters, the one where they lose everything just like they planned for me. But I wasn't prepared for how quickly they'd escalate. 2 weeks later, Dr. Morrison, David's doctor, not mine, visited the facility. He ran cognitive tests that were designed to fail. When I purposely answered correctly, he marked them wrong anyway. I'm recommending increased supervision, he told the staff. Mr. Marcus is showing signs of severe decline. That night, they moved me to the memory care unit, locked doors, no phone access, supervised everything. But they'd made a mistake. The night nurse Maria had worked construction with her husband years ago. I'd kept him on payroll for 6 months after an injury, making sure his family didn't lose their house. Mr. Marcus, she whispered during medication rounds. I know you're not supposed to be here. What do you need? I need you to call this number, I said, giving her Robert's information. Tell him it's time for the nuclear option. She nodded. My husband always said you were the only honest contractor in the city. We've got your back." The next morning, Agnes created a diversion, a medical emergency that required an ambulance. In the chaos, Maria slipped me a cell phone. I called Robert. "Fell everything now." "All of it?" "Everything. The fraud, the elder abuse, the embezzlement, and Robert, call the FBI about the wire fraud. That makes it federal. This will destroy them, Marcus." I thought of Eleanor's last words, barely audible over the hospital machines. "Protect our legacy." Then they should have remembered who taught them to build, I said, and who taught them to destroy. The next 3 weeks were silent agony, but beneath the surface my children's world was crumbling. It started with Michael. The gambling commission received an anonymous tip about his debts connecting to his employer's missing funds. Within days he was arrested at his office, hauled out in handcuffs while his coworkers watched. The news made the business section, local financial manager arrested for embezzlement. Sarah's husband Tom was next. The IRS, acting on detailed information about a decade of unreported cash income, froze their accounts. Every hidden dollar, every skimmed payment from his contracting business, all exposed. Sarah called the facility, screaming at the staff that she needed to see me immediately. They told her I was too fragile for visitors. But David got the worst of it. Robert had filed injunctions freezing every property transfer. Then he'd contacted David's business partners with evidence that David had fraudulently used my properties as collateral for personal loans. His construction company, already struggling, collapsed overnight when the banks called in every note. The phone Maria had given me rang constantly with texts from my children, each more desperate than the last. "Dad, something's happening. Please call me. This is insane. Someone's targeting us. I'm going to prison. Help me." I didn't respond. I sat in my tiny room looking at the photo of Eleanor I'd hidden in my sock drawer and waited. Linda was the one who figured it out. She called the facility directly, demanding to speak to me. Maria brought me the phone. She says it's life or death. I took it. "Hello, Linda. You did this." Her voice was ice. "You're destroying your own children." "I'm protecting my wife's legacy," I said calmly. "You should have remembered that I spent 40 years fighting contractors, unions, and City Hall. You thought I'd just roll over for you? We'll fight this. We have power of attorney. You have a document you modified after I signed it. Robert has the originals, the security footage of you discussing it, and recordings of every threat you made." Silence. Then, "What do you want?" "I want my children to remember who I was before they decided I was just a bank account with a heartbeat." She hung up. That night, Agnes passed away in her sleep. Natural causes, the doctor said. Peaceful. Her last words to me that evening had been, "You won, Marcus, but what did you win?" I stood at her funeral 3 days later, special permission granted for me to attend. Her son wasn't there. He was serving 18 months in federal prison, but her granddaughter was a young woman who looked like Agnes must have 40 years ago. "She talked about you," the granddaughter said. "Said you were the only one here who understood." Understood what? That revenge without purpose is just cruelty. But revenge with purpose, that's justice. When I returned to Sunset Gardens, the director was waiting. "Mr. Marcus, your son David is here. He says it's urgent." David was in the visitor's room looking like he'd aged 10 years in 3 weeks. His clothes were wrinkled, his eyes bloodshot, his hands shaking. "Dad?" he started, then stopped. For the first time in years, he actually looked at me. "I'm going to lose everything." "I know. The house, the business, everything. Linda left, took the kids. Says I'm toxic to her brand." Her brand, even I hadn't expected that level of cold. "Michael's looking at 5 years minimum," David continued. "Sarah and Tom are being investigated for tax evasion. We're all going to be destroyed." "Yes," I said simply. "Can you stop it?" I thought about it. Really considered it. These were my children, after all. The babies Eleanor had sung to sleep. The toddlers I'd taught to walk. The teenagers I'd driven to countless practices and games. But then I remembered them laughing about putting me in a home while their mother's body was still warm. Remembered them dividing my life like vultures over carrion. Remembered Sarah slapping me for suggesting Emma deserved something. "No," I said. "I can't stop it. You did this to yourselves. We're your children." "You were," I said, standing to leave. "But my children would never have done what you did. My children died the day their mother did. You're just strangers who share my DNA." I walked out, but David called after me. "What about Emma? She doesn't deserve this." I stopped, turned. "Emma is the only one I'm protecting. She'll be fine." "How?" "That's no longer your concern." The next morning I checked myself out of Sunset Gardens. The staff was shocked. They'd been told I was incompetent, but Robert had filed the paperwork proving otherwise, including cognitive tests from my real doctor showing perfect mental acuity. "Where will you go?" Maria asked, helping me pack my few belongings. "Home," I said. "My real home." The house felt like a mausoleum when I walked in. David had had movers take anything of value, but they'd left what mattered. Eleanor's presence in every corner, every shadow, every beam of light through windows she'd chosen. I walked to the kitchen. Her coffee cup was gone, probably sold in some estate sale bundle, but her apron still hung on its hook. I pressed it to my face, and for the first time since her death, I truly wept. Not for my children. They'd made their choices, but for Eleanor, who'd seen this coming and tried to protect me even from beyond the grave. That evening, Robert came by with boxes of documents. "The FBI wants to interview you next week," he said. "The wire fraud charges alone could put David away for 20 years. "I don't want them in prison," I said. "I want them to understand what they did." "Then what do you suggest?" I thought about Agnes's words, about justice versus cruelty. "Offer them a deal. They sign away any claim to my estate, present or future, and I'll withdraw the criminal complaints. The civil suits stand. They need to return everything they stole, but no prison. Marcus, they committed serious crimes. So did I, probably in building my business. The difference is I did it for my family. They did it to their family." Robert nodded slowly. "I'll make the offer." They all signed within 48 hours. Broken, bankrupt, but free. I stood in my empty house, surrounded by ghosts and memories, and made one more phone call. "Emma, it's your grandfather. I think it's time you knew the truth about your family." She came that evening, driving through the rain just as Eleanor and I had once driven to this house for the first time, 45 years ago. "Grandpa," she said, hugging me at the door. "Mom said you were sick, that you were in a home." I was, but not because I was sick. I told her everything. Showed her the documents, the recordings, the evidence, watched her face cycle through disbelief, anger, and finally deep sadness. "I knew something was wrong," she said quietly. "Mom wouldn't let me visit, said you were dangerous." "I am dangerous," I said, "to people who betray family. What happens now?" "Now, I need to tell you about your grandmother's last wish." I pulled out Eleanor's letter to Emma, the one she'd written but never sent, trusting me to deliver it when the time was right. Emma read it, tears streaming down her face. When she finished, she looked up. "Grandma knew?" "She knew everything. She protected me, even knowing she wouldn't be here to see it through." "What about Mom? Uncle David? Uncle Michael? They made their choices. But you have different choices to make." I showed her the codicil to my will. The house would be hers, but only if she lived in it, raised a family in it, made it a home again. "Everything else goes to charity," I said. "The properties, the investments, all of it. But this house, Eleanor's house, stays in the family, the real family." "Grandpa, I can't accept this. It's too much." "It's not enough," I said. "But it's what I have to give. Your grandmother planted roses by the kitchen window the first year we lived here. They still bloom every spring. Someone needs to take care of them. We sat in the kitchen in the spot where Eleanor's coffee cup should have been, and talked until dawn, about Eleanor, about the past, about the future, about forgiveness and its limits. "Will you ever forgive them?" Emma asked as the sun painted the walls gold. "Forgiveness isn't mine to give," I said. "That belonged to your grandmother, and they lost it when they celebrated her death as their payday." 6 months later, I was diagnosed with a cancer I'd hidden from everyone. The confusion my children had mocked had been early symptoms I'd ignored, too focused on Eleanor's illness to care about my own. "How long?" I asked Dr. Morrison, my real doctor, not David's puppet. "With treatment, maybe a year. Without, 6 months. I chose without. Eleanor had suffered through treatment, and it had only bought her pain. I wanted my remaining time clear-headed and present. Emma moved in the next week, bringing life back to the dead house. She cooked in Eleanor's kitchen, tended her roses, filled the empty rooms with laughter and friends. "I'm applying to law school," she told me one evening. "I want to be like Agnes. Fight for people who can't fight for themselves. Your grandmother would be proud." "What about my parents?" "They'll survive. They always do." And they did in their own broken way. David found work as a day laborer with one of my old competitors, humiliating but honest work. Sarah divorced Tom when he went to prison and lived with her sister, working retail. Michael got out early for good behavior and joined a program for gambling addiction. They tried to contact me, especially near the end when the cancer became visible, but the restraining orders held. The last time I saw them was from my bedroom window. 3 figures standing at the gate Eleanor had insisted we install, unable to enter the garden they'd tried to steal. I died on a Tuesday morning, sitting in Eleanor's chair watching the sunrise through the window I'd installed 45 years ago. Emma found me, peaceful, a letter in my hand addressed to my children. At the funeral, David, Sarah, and Michael sat in the back, legally required to stay 50 feet away even in death. Emma stood at the podium, composed and strong, and read my final words. "I spent my life building something to leave behind. You taught me the hardest lesson, that legacy isn't what you build, it's who you raise. I failed you as a father if money mattered more than memory. The empire remains, but not for you. It will build schools, hospitals, and homes for families who understand what I forgot to teach you. Wealth is meaningless without worth. You were my children once. In my memories, you still are. Frozen in time before greed replaced love. I choose to remember you that way." David on his first bike, Sarah at her graduation, Michael hitting his first home run. Those children were worthy of everything I built. The people you became were worthy of nothing but this lesson. When you sell your soul for money, you can't buy it back with tears. Love. The man you called Dad when you needed something. Emma folded the letter carefully, then added her own words. "My grandfather built an empire with his hands, and lost a family to their greed. But he also taught me that sometimes the greatest act of love is knowing when to let go. The Marcus Foundation will help families in crisis, people who've been betrayed by those they trusted most. It will be his true legacy, not the money his children wanted, but the hope he'd lost and found again." Grandma Eleanor's roses still bloom by the kitchen window. I water them every morning with the same cup she used, the one Grandpa could never throw away. It's not much, but it's everything. Sometimes love isn't about what you leave behind. It's about what you protect from those who would destroy it. The service ended. My children remained seated as everyone else filed past, offering Emma condolences. When the cemetery was empty except for the 3 of them and the groundskeeper, they finally approached the grave. David placed a single rose on the casket, from a gas station, not Eleanor's garden. Sarah left a photo, one where she'd been cropped out, leaving only me. Michael said nothing, just stood there with empty hands and empty eyes. They walked away. Out of the cemetery, out of Emma's life, out of the story they'd written with their own greed. Emma stayed until sunset, sitting between 2 graves, reading aloud from Eleanor's favorite book. The groundskeeper, an old friend from construction days, waited patiently. "Take your time, miss," he said. "Mr. Marcus paid for perpetual care. These graves will be tended long after we're all gone." "He thought of everything," Emma said. "No," the groundskeeper replied. "He just learned from someone who did. Mrs. Eleanor. She knew how this would end. Told me years ago to watch out for you. Said you were the only one who inherited their hearts instead of their wallets." As the sun set behind the headstones, Emma made a promise to both graves. "I'll take care of the roses. I'll fill the house with family, real family. The kind you choose, not just the kind you're born to. And I'll remember the lesson. Money can buy a lot of things, but it can't buy back the moments you waste trying to steal it." She walked home, to Eleanor's house, to Marcus's legacy, to roses that would bloom every spring for generations who'd understand their value had nothing to do with the property they grew on. Behind the cemetery gates, 3 shadows watched her go, forever locked out of the garden they'd tried to steal, learning too late that some doors, once closed, never open again. And somewhere in whatever comes after, Eleanor and I sat together again, watching our real legacy walk toward tomorrow, knowing that sometimes the greatest revenge isn't destroying those who betrayed you. It's building something beautiful from the ashes they left behind. If this story touched your heart or reminded you of someone you know, please like this video and subscribe to our channel. Share your own experiences with family and forgiveness in the comments below. To hear another powerful story about redemption and revenge, click the video on your left. Remember, sometimes the greatest inheritance isn't money, it's the strength to stand alone.